Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to just give it a couple more minutes to make sure everybody is able to access the room. Just sit tight and we'll be right back. Thanks. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to get another minute or so to make sure everybody's able to access the room. So we'll be right back. Thanks. All right, it looks like the room's pretty full. Why don't we get started? Nick, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today. We're hosting town halls every Thursday while we are all safe at home in an effort to keep you informed, answer your questions, and to keep the community engaged. We firmly believe that opening the lines of communication and collaboration will be key to navigating these challenging times. Our goal with these town halls is to provide a forum for cooperation, sharing best practices and ideas, as well as answering your questions. Today's town hall, Recreating Responsibly During the Pandemic, is the fifth in this series, and we're excited about the group we have assembled. Sarah Carpenter, co-owner of American Avalanche Institute, Jay Miller, physician assistant at Cedar Point Health Urgent Care in Grand Junction, Colorado, and Mark Schroetel, general manager of Powder Mountain. And of course, our moderator, writer, and editor, Megan Michelson. But first, I'm going to introduce Eric Henderson. Many of you know Hendy, founder of Meteorite PR and accomplished ski mountaineer. Hendy has spent over 20 years working in the winter outdoor markets. He manages PR for SIA and has spearheaded the Curb Your Turns campaign. We'll kick off with a discussion amongst our panelists and then spend some time answering your questions. Some of those have been sent in advance. We'll answer as many as we can in the time we have. Right at the bottom of the window, you'll see a Q&A section on your desktop. Put your questions in there and we'll answer them in order they are received and as many as we can. Thank you again for joining, and let's kick this over to Hendy right now. Hendy, go for it.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Good to see everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm honored and excited for this conversation. It means a lot to the ski community at large and everyone that's at home dealing with this epidemic. I want to introduce you to the moderator today, which is Megan Michelson. Megan is a freelance writer based in Tahoe City, California. She's been the editor at Ski Magazine and free skiing editor for ESPN.com. Since she's moved to Tahoe, she's become a freelance and a senior correspondent for Powder Magazine, editor-at-large for Backcountry Magazine, and a regular contributor to the San Francisco Chronicle, Men's Journal, Ski, Backpacker, and many, many more. Megan is also a correspondent for Outside Magazine, and she most recently wrote an article titled, "You Probably Shouldn't Be Skiing Right Now." And she's also a dear friend of mine that we have a long history of skiing in the backcountry together in the Tetons. So Megan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Hendy. I know there's some issues with audio too, so please chime in if folks can't hear very well. My pleasure to be here and get this conversation going. I wanted to introduce our guests again. We've got Sarah Carpenter, co-owner of the American Avalanche Institute based in Jackson, Wyoming. The AAI has been teaching avalanche awareness courses around the globe since 1973. We have Jay Miller, a physician assistant at Cedar Point Health Urgent Care in Grand Junction, Colorado. He spent 5 years as a park ranger and medic with the Grand Teton National Park, working in emergency services and mountain rescue. And we have Mark Schroetel, general manager of Powder Mountain Resort in Eden, Utah. So obviously, how to recreate responsibly outside during a pandemic is a new subject for all of us. So thank you for being here to discuss it. When I was reporting my story for Outside on whether or not people should be backcountry skiing right now, I wanted to raise some questions about the ethics of backcountry skiing during our current health crisis. I proposed a few questions. Can you safely ski near your house, or would it involve non-essential travel? Can you choose terrain that's ultra-conservative to reduce your chances of injury or rescue? And you already have proper avalanche training, a partner who wouldn't be increasing your risk of exposure, and the proper gear and knowledge. We've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So what we want to encourage as an industry right now is not a steep increase in backcountry skiing, but rather doing the right thing and staying home to not further stress the healthcare system with preventable accidents. Those are some of the things that we want to discuss here today. I want to acknowledge and thank SIA and the work the team there is doing to get the word out about Curb Your Turns, and challenge all snow sports enthusiasts to either hang up your boards or go somewhere mellow and in your backyard to help flatten the curve and fight this virus. The mountains will be here tomorrow, and we all want to get to that tomorrow collectively. Backcountry skiers, as many of you are, already live by the motto, live to ski another day, and that certainly applies to our current situation. So with that, let's jump in and talk to our panelists. Sarah, let's start with you first. Can you discuss the discrepancy between avalanche forecast centers across the country? Why did some of them close quickly in early and mid-March, and why are some of them remaining open?
It's interesting. I've had a couple conversations with some of the forecast center directors, as well as folks that work for the centers. Both Avalanche Canada and the Northwest Avalanche Center closed early. As I understand it, it's in part because of the more strict stay-at-home guidance from their states. And with NWAC, the Forest Service followed up and also started closing trailheads. And then also, as I dug deeper between Avalanche Canada and the Northwest Avalanche Center, they rely heavily on professional observations. So the observations of guiding operations or folks that are out in the field all the time. And since they were getting minimal observations, they also felt like they couldn't put out a good forecast. In talking to other forecast centers like the Utah Avalanche Center, the Colorado Avalanche Center, the Bridger Teton, their sentiment is that people in their area are gonna travel in the backcountry, and it's their duty to provide information to help people make better and safer decisions. So it seems like folks are looking at it through a couple different lenses, all with the intent of keeping people safer, but just with a couple different approaches.
Okay, great, thank you. Jay, there was an avalanche with one victim seriously injured in Ophir, Colorado on March 26th. How did that stress the local resources of search and rescue, airlifting resources, and to St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction where he was flown?
Thanks, Megan. I talked to a couple people that were involved in that or with search and rescue teams in the area. And one, I'm aware that search and rescue teams are pared down to skeleton crews right now. One reason is they only are provided a certain number of N95 masks. So you're not getting a full crew. I think that event, 36 responders were on scene, or 36 plus. So I think there were plenty of people there to help, but that said, their resources are stressed right now. They're only allowing one person into the rescue barn to get equipment, so timing is going to be put off. It's going to be delayed, your rescue times. You're just at more risk. But one thing to consider is those people live for this. This is what they do and what they've trained for. And they're willing to take the risks to get out there in the weather and on steep terrain and get you out of there. Now they're risk that they're having to calculate is whether they want to be exposed. And you're bringing 36 people together who are aware of social distancing and are all of a sudden thrown into an event where they're very conscious about they're not protecting themselves very well. And normally they want to be there. It's what they do, but you don't want to be there as an injured party or victim. And you also don't want all those people crowding around you. Those people coming from the hospital are also coming from an area where they're treating patients with COVID right now. They don't have a whole lot of patients right now at St. Mary's. They may in the future, hopefully not. But those people are already at higher risk, and you're bringing yourself into a hospital where you don't want to be there. So you don't want to get hurt right now. I think it is another risk that we hadn't anticipated before, is getting exposed. Like normally we rely on care providers to take care of us when we're injured or need care, but we don't want to see you injured in an event where we need to come find you.
Great, thanks, Jay. Mark, let's talk about the resort side of things. Powder Mountain closed for uphill skinning and hiking beginning March 29th to support the governor's urgings for people to stay home and maintain social distancing. Can you tell us what happened between the time you guys closed your lifts on March 16th, but continued to allow uphill access until March 29th, so we can understand what led to your decision to close?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it's important to understand a little bit of what happened in the final days we had the lifts open too. We could see the pandemic spreading, and we took it very seriously, and we closed our lodges. We stopped food and beverage operations. For those of you that aren't familiar with Powder Mountain, we have a huge amount of skiable terrain, over 8,400 acres, and we have a really artificially low skier cap. We cap day tickets at 1,500. So we felt we were in a unique position to set ourselves up to offer a safe, kind of amended experience for people to get into the mountains and recreate and still enjoy the abundant snowfall we've had here in Utah this year. And so we even lowered our cap further to 1,000. We restricted occupancy in some of our other spaces that were kind of necessary, like rental shop. We closed Powder Country, which is a shuttled service, and we closed our single ride cats where people were forced to congregate. That was on the 14th. And then on the 15th and 16th, what we saw is as other resorts in Utah started to close, we became a magnet even for people coming from outside the state, because other resorts were starting to close, and people we were noticing were coming from areas that were starting to pop up as hotspots as resort towns, and we didn't want to bring that problem to our community. So that's when we decided to close. And the reason I bring that up is maybe it was foreshadowing of things to come, and we might have been better prepared if we would have thought about that. But our normal closing procedure is we close our lifts. We take about 7 to 10 days to tear down the mountain, make it safe for people to come and skin and hike and enjoy the snow that's left over after the lifts close. We did that. We reopened on the 26th for uphill travel. And that first day, we posted, some pretty restrictive guidelines. Don't go into Powder Country and self-shuttle. Stay out of the areas that we have marked closed for avalanche danger. Don't congregate in the parking lots. Don't make it a party scene. The first day, people were respected the guidelines for the most part. We had to go out and talk to a few people in the parking lot, shut down a few people self-shuttling in Powder Country. The next day, Governor Herbert issued a more restrictive, still not a mandatory stay-at-home order, but more restrictive guidelines for social distancing. We were evaluating those, and then what we saw in the parking lot was, again, we kind of become this magnet because we're so accessible, being an upside down mountain and being kind of a rarity in the West, that people can drive to the top. They can self-shuttle a fairly sizable amount of terrain. And so people were coming in from outside the area. It wasn't just our normal pass holders and dedicated local skiers that were coming up to take advantage. It was people that we saw that shouldn't be in the backcountry, that didn't have the proper equipment or experience, but more importantly, just kind of ignoring the guidelines that we laid out. And by Sunday, it had really just become something that we were looking at as a management team, and we're very fearful of becoming another hotspot, because people were just piling into cars with strangers and self-shuttling, and the parking lot had become a party scene, and that's when we made the decision that we had to shut it down.
Makes sense. Probably a good call at that point. Sarah, let's head back to you. Using social media, you pivoted the American Avalanche Institute to digital learning and curriculum during this crisis, specifically using Instagram Live and Facebook Live. Can you talk about what spurred that and how the response was?
Yeah, I mean, we did have to cut our season short, and for years we've been moving all of our prep materials online, so students get material before they show up for a course, so they can watch it, they can rewatch it. We feel like it's actually a nice way for people to learn. And then once everything shut down, I was talking to a friend who's involved with a ski shop, and they said that all of the touring gear was bought out, but people weren't necessarily buying transceivers, shovels, probes as well. And we as a company felt like it was important to offer some sort of informal avalanche education, informal mentorship, while people were out traveling, maybe not having any avalanche education experience, as well as folks who have taken avalanche courses and are now trying to figure out what to do during this time. So it's been a great way for us to communicate with our audience across, all of the U.S. So there's no geographic barrier like there is with in-person courses. And it's also been a really nice way to answer questions. As we're doing an Instagram Live, people type in their questions, we're able to adapt, shift our messaging. So for us, we've just been trying to pick a topic or two every week and invite people to connect and just gain some sort of information as a way to further their education, as well as to be able to take something into next season and be better prepared for next season. So it's also been a nice way to just adapt our messaging as things have evolved, like, Powder Mountain adapting their closures. For us, it's been a good way to adapt from, hey, be really safe, to, hey, actually think really long and hard about being a good community member and whether or not you should be in the backcountry at all.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Speaking of social media, Jay, let's go back to you. How do you think social media and media coverage from ski and outdoor publications has helped or hurt during this pandemic from your perspective?
I've been trying to limit my access to news and look for good information out there and read more articles for enjoyment. I have come across some really good articles that have been written in several publications out there, newspapers included, like Curb Your Turns articles, best example I can think of. I think social media, is beneficial in this aspect. It can get on everybody, share those articles, and I think the American Avalanche Institute and AAA and I think the Access Fund have all put out some good public announcements about stay healthy, stay safe, people. I think it's great to be able to share those and make sure the word gets out and further. So I think there's no negatives that I can think of on it. Everybody keep getting the word out.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of influencers and athletes talk about what they're doing at home too, which I think it is encouraging for all of us to know that, we're definitely not in this alone.
Yep.
Mark, what would you say the reaction has been from locals at Powder Mountain, pass holders and guests who were maybe planning their spring break trips or looking forward to spring ski season on your decision to close, and how have you managed that?
I think, the initial response was fairly mixed. I mean, I think there were half the people that were understanding, half the people that thought we were overreacting. I think as momentum grew, the more reality set in and the more people were supportive of our decision. And I think now it's overwhelmingly supportive. I think particularly with our pass holders who are incredibly loyal, they've been very understanding. And I think part of that, we got lucky and had a super early start this year, and we only ended up 8 days short of an average season. And we had some great snow early and mid-season, so I think that helped soften the blow. The people who were most disappointed were the people that were kind of caught in the fray when we decided to close and were already coming to town. And we took care of those people in terms of refunds. And again, mostly they were supportive. Some people were, understandably disappointed because conditions were great. We were getting snow when we closed, and we got a lot of snow right after we closed when people were planning vacations. But overall, it's been supportive, and we've been tried to be sensitive with our messaging. We were put in a bit of a weird position closing the lifts for the season on the 16th, but then our season pass sale launched on the 20th, and there was a lot of debate about whether we should even move forward with it. But again, we're kind of unique in that we cap our season pass sales at 3,000, and we sell out. And probably at that point, we already had 25% of our passes sold. So we didn't think it would be fair to the people who had already invested in their pass to go ahead and delay it. And so we launched it, but just really soft messaging to our existing pass holders, and really focused on kind of using stock images and messages of hope for better things to come, either later this year or as we get into next season, and encourage people to think about all the powder turns they're going to get in the future. And that's been well received. And like I said, for the most part, people have been incredibly supportive.
Yeah, we're definitely all going to be excited to ski again when we can. So hopefully those who had to cancel trips can get those lined up for next winter or whenever it's appropriate. Sarah, let's go back to you. There have been 3 avalanche fatalities in the Tetons since March 15th, and you live in Jackson. Can you talk about the hazard of those days, and each case's similarities and differences?
Yeah, it has definitely been an unfortunate spring for us around here. The first accident that resulted in a fatality was March 15th, and that was actually out of bounds at Pebble Creek Ski Area, which is just outside of Pocatello, Idaho. And it doesn't have an avalanche forecast, so I couldn't get a forecast rating for that one. The second fatality happened on April 1st on Mount Taylor, just off of Teton Pass, and the forecast, the hazard was moderate. And then the third one happened on the 3rd of April, and the actual hazard was low. As I dug into these avalanches, there were some similarities that jumped out at me. One was that in all 3 of these, folks either didn't have transceivers or the transceivers weren't turned on. So the team at Pebble Creek, it was experienced skiers that had skied Pebble Creek for a long time, left the ski area boundary, and none of them had rescue gear. And then the Mount Taylor fatality and the fatality in the Snake River Range, both of those victims were experienced users, were both wearing transceivers, but those transceivers weren't on. And so that piece for me, it just feels like such a tragedy in that, I think that we all have really full brains right now trying to deal with so much uncertainty and trying to figure out what life looks like in the midst of coronavirus. So it's easy to skip steps. So one thing that jumped out to me with all 3 of these accidents was just the importance of ritual, in terms of wearing transceivers every time you go out, put it on, turn it on when you're in the house, and then the importance of beacon checks in the parking lot and making sure everyone has rescue gear. That was one thing that stuck out to me. And then a couple other things. There was recent loading on all 3 of these accidents. In Pebble Creek, they had 20 inches of snow, so quite a bit of loading. And then Mount Taylor, there was about a foot in in the last 24 hours. And then, that storm persisted for a few days, so there was recent loading in the Snake River Range. And I find it interesting in the spring in that, 11 inches of snow in the middle of the winter isn't always that significant of loading, especially in the Tetons. And you don't often see a ton of avalanche activity, but I feel like in the spring, even just, 6 inches or a foot of loading, and we actually see more avalanche activity, especially on southerly aspects, because you just have this slick sliding surface. And both the April 1st and the April 3rd accident happened on south or southeast slopes. And so my assumption is that there was a nice slick bed surface, and then just a recent load that was moved around by wind, so it was even further wind loaded. Yeah, all three of these folks were, yeah, like I said, experienced users. They were found either by probe lines or it didn't say how the victim at Pebble Creek was found, but really the big thing for me was that lack of rescue gear turned on. Just really tragic events that then involved quite a bit of search and rescue response. So exposing, 30 people in the Mount Taylor incident. In the snowmobile incident, there was 10 folks out there riding together, and they were able to find the victim in the probe line. So yeah, all tragic events, and hopefully reminders to build in rituals every day.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Sarah. Jay, when someone comes into your urgent care clinic with, say, a blown knee, how does that take away from resources that might be needed elsewhere in the clinic? And then have you seen a decrease in those types of injuries or other types of situations since the stay-at-home order in Colorado has been issued?
I think any injury or anybody coming into the clinic right now, everybody in this time right now, I think it's important to consider everybody is considered positive for coronavirus. We don't know. There's asymptomatic people, and you're coming into a clinic where there might be other people in there being seen as well. But anybody coming in, then we have to use extra PPE, personal protection equipment, and that's taking away from resources because as you've probably heard across the nation, there's a shortage right now. So anytime we have to use anything, it's taken away from our supplies right now. But that's important to keep us all safe. Then if you're in for a knee injury, let's say in our clinic, we don't have x-rays. So we send you out with an order for x-rays to take to the hospital or outpatient x-ray radiology center. I don't want to risk exposure there. You're going to another place where you're around numerous people. Also, you probably be given more PPE while you're there. In the case you have an orthopedic requirement, orthopedic offices are strained a little bit. They don't want you coming in. They're doing telemed as best they can too. If you end up with a knee that sometimes would be surgical, I know in state of Colorado right now, there's a halt on non-essential surgeries. You might be put off. You might be walking around in your splint for a month, whereas you may have gotten surgery right away to get your ACL fixed, or they might put you on hold and let's have you back when we're doing non-essential surgeries. So you might be hurting for a longer period of time. I think that's the main point is just it's not a time you want to get injured, so it's a time to be extra safe.
Great, thanks, Jay. Mark, let's head back to you. Once Powder Mountain closed for the season and managed those expectations amongst guests and locals, how quickly did the resort change messaging and focus on the positive, focus on reliving what a good winter you had and looking forward to next season?
We shifted fairly quickly, just because the responses we were getting were fairly positive, and we didn't want to, quell any of their enthusiasm for skiing. So we shifted 2 days after closing the lifts, and we've continued that messaging since. We have a lot of great support from our sponsors and our partners, and we had a ton of swag to give away. So we've been doing that to keep people stoke level high, and through various contests just to keep them engaged, and then just continuing with our season pass sale messaging. And I think there's still great enthusiasm there. We're seeing sales pace for our season passes at double what it was last year this time. So I think when we come out of this, people are going to be wanting to get out and recreate for sure.
That's good to hear. I have a couple of questions for the whole panel, and then we'll open it up to any participant questions after that. I want to end this sort of on a more positive note and looking forward and offering people some takeaways. Let's talk about sort of what we've learned from this, what could be some silver linings for education, ski resorts, medical clinics. Sarah, where would you say you see avalanche education going in the future after this?
I think the coronavirus has pushed creativity in terms of avalanche education. So I see education becoming more and more creative. I see more of it going online, and I see hopefully a bigger push of more informal education as well as those formal classes. So.
Great, that's an upside. Jay, how would you say COVID-19 has impacted your practice and the way that the healthcare system is operating?
We quickly started doing telemedicine, got that up and working, and transitioned over to how do we take care of people and keep them in their homes. That's been interesting, and I'm sure that will continue after this is calmed down. Telemedicine will be a bigger part of our practice. We're seeing decreased numbers of people coming in with injuries. So for the most part, people are playing it safe, which is great. They're getting the message, but so that's encouraging. People are taking it to heart, and I think that's about it. So we're here if you need us, but stay safe.
Great, thanks. Jay's there, but no one wants to go see Jay right now. So, and then Mark, you obviously mentioned an uptick in season pass sales, but have there been other silver linings for Powder Mountain through this whole crisis?
Yeah, I think for us, there's been, and I think again, because we're uniquely positioned in the way we limit attendance, I think there's going to be even increased interest in visitation to Powder Mountain because people are looking for a less crowded experience. And I think that's what's driving people into the backcountry and side country now. I think, as an industry as a whole, I think we've got some problems to solve in terms of the historical bottlenecks in resort operations and cramming people into tight lodges for food service and into confined rental spaces and things like that. And I think everybody's doing a lot of brainstorming and coming up with creative solutions for addressing those issues that hopefully will result in a better guest experience coming out the other side of this as well. We're just also one of the lessons we've learned watching what happened with relative scarcity of access to backcountry and side country terrain post resort closure, and the increased demand that we're seeing because people are looking to get out and recreate. How do we responsibly manage the opening of our summer amenities, because we have a pretty extensive mountain bike and hiking trail system that's open and free of charge to the public. And we all know, for those of us that live along the Wasatch, that trail access is at a premium, and a lot of our trails are already overloaded. And how do we manage that when those start to reopen and some of these social distancing guidelines start to be relaxed, and not put ourselves in a position where we're endangering our community or risking another hotspot popping up in a second wave.
Great. I like the idea of resorts taking a note from Powder Mountain's playbook of limiting the number of people there each day. We might not see lift lines again, which could be a good thing. But then obviously it's, the number of people that get to enjoy this sport that we all love so much. So it's kind of a tough situation. Hopefully resorts can figure. So we all got into this industry obviously because we love being outside and skiing, and we know it's good for our physical and mental health. I'd love to hear from all three of you how you're getting outside right now, what you're doing to get your outside fix, and how you define curb your turns for yourself. Is it completely hanging up your skis, or are you able to ski responsibly? Sarah, can you tell us? I know you live in a yurt on a dirt road, so I imagine social distancing. How are you getting outside?
Not too bad. Yeah, we live in a little straw bale house, and our office is a yurt. And we've actually been doing a lot of Nordic skiing. We still have snow on the ground around town, and so we've haven't been backcountry skiing, but my husband and I have been walking across the street and cross cruising through the fields, which has been great. And then using our local gym has been posting great workouts online, and then when it's sunny, we've been riding gravel bikes. So that's been our approach to sanity.
Dave, what about you? You're in a little bit more of an urban environment. How are you getting time outside?
Yeah.
Or
I actually live in Palisade, which is a few minutes outside of Grand Junction. So it's a small town, and we're able to get outside pretty easily, 5-minute, 10-minute bike ride or car ride from our house. So getting out to some trails where I'm not seeing crowded parking lots has been my objective. And we've turned around at a few spots where it looked too crowded. But I think practicing what I preach is, going 70% instead of 100%, not bombing down the run out after a bike ride, taking every step and enjoying the surroundings a little bit more. So I've been happy to, get the legs moving, but not as risky and fast. So it's been nice.
great. And that's a good reminder we didn't really talk extensively about, but sort of taking the more conservative options right now. Mark, what have you been doing to take care of yourself?
We're lucky we live up in the Ogden Valley, and it's pretty uncrowded up here. A lot of our trails are getting a lot of pressure, but at the end of my neighborhood, I've got a nice little park with some hiking trails, and family and I have been going out and hiking there. And I gotta say that as much as I've always hated riding my trainer, I invested in a smart trainer during all this and have gotten addicted to Zwift. So hopefully I'll be in better shape once it gets a little bit better for riding outside up here.
Great. Okay, thank you so much to the panelists. That was really informative, you guys, so I really appreciate you taking the time. Looks like we've got some questions already. If you're listening in and you want to submit a question, just click that Q&A button on the bottom bar. I will just dive in here with the first one I see. And Hendy, if you want to jump in with any specifically, let me know. But Greg Oakley said, what would the panel like the message to be from influencers to get people to simply stay out of the backcountry from any potential dangers associated with this type of recreating? So maybe one of you, Sarah or Mark or Jay, feel compelled to sort of answer what you think the message from influencers should be right now. Should it be simply stay away, or what should those people be sending out in terms of their messaging?
I mean, I think to me, this goes along with the SIA campaign of curb your turns. And so adopting that message out to the general public is really important. And, what we've been pushing is people think more like a community member and less like an individual. So.
I agree with that. And I think, from a resort perspective, one thing we all know from resort activity is where there's tracks, people will follow. And, I think there's a lot of people that are drawn to resorts because of the easy access, but they also don't have the skill set or the equipment to be safe in the backcountry. And so we're really just encouraging people to find alternatives that aren't going to potentially put other people at risk. Because if you're an experienced backcountry traveler, your tracks could be leading someone that doesn't have that experience into a bad situation that could snowball into all the impacts that we've talked about in terms of emergency response and the impact on the community.
This is Jay. I think too, keep it in mind, we need these outlets. So everybody should be encouraged to get out, just look at it from a different perspective. And it's important for us as providers and hospital workers, we need this outlet as well. So act responsibly. I don't want any more trailheads closed down. We're going to lose that opportunity. So get out there, but play it safe.
Okay, great. Mark, here's one for you from a participant. Do you think that, obviously after the resorts closed, we saw that big uptick in backcountry skiing and uphill skiing at resorts. Do you think that closing the ski resorts will lead to more people going into the backcountry in future years? Will that growth in backcountry participants stay as we move forward?
I think it will. I think, as people get their first taste of a true backcountry experience, I think that demand's only going to grow. And we've actually seen that trend accelerating even before this, with people seeking alternate access to backcountry and side country experiences. And we've tailored a lot of our product offerings through our adventure center to that. And that's part of our discussion internally right now is, what can we do to facilitate that movement and make it safe and more accessible to more people?
Okay, great. Another question from Cindy about uphill skiing at resorts. She's in Aspen, and all 4 of Aspen's ski areas are still open to uphilling. She says it's been a sanity saver, there haven't been any accidents so far, thankfully, but a few locals are vehemently critical of those who are uphilling. Maybe another one for Mark, unless Sarah, you want to weigh in. How do you feel about sort of that line between, the resorts that are still open to uphilling versus the people who are critical of those, doing that?
I think it's really individualized on the resort. Like I said, we're just so unique in being an upside down mountain. We're so easily accessible to people that I think it draws more people that don't have the skill set and the proper equipment into an experience that they may not be bargaining for. They may still think, oh, it's a resort, it's a controlled environment, I'm safe. And it couldn't be any further from the truth. Once we're closed, and especially this year where we've gotten a lot of snow post lift closure, you don't have the skier compaction, you don't have groomed terrain, and it gets dangerous. And but for the resorts that are more traditional with parking areas and trail access at the bottom, and people are having to work to get to skiable terrain, and that tends to spread people out and limit the crowds as well. We wholeheartedly support it for the reasons that Jay and Sarah were talking about. I mean, it's great to get outside and recreate, and especially during these times, it's good to clear your head and provide access to the environments that we love and do it in a safe and responsible manner.
Great. Mark, you're a popular guy in the audience questions, but Roger Strong had a question about in Powder Mountain's obviously already backcountry friendly for your resort guests when those are open, but do you think that other resorts will consider more access, education, and support for backcountry access, given that's one of the highest growing segments of the ski industry?
I know there's a lot. I mean, I've had other resort managers reach out to me about what we do, because we have 4 areas of the resort that are really dedicated to people who want to skin or hike to access that terrain, and that's a unique offering. And again, we're just lucky that we have such expansive terrain and we're able to do that. Some states, including Utah, if you are on lift served groomed terrain, there's prohibitions against it during operating hours. So there's limitations, and I think it's resort specific, but I think there's a lot of interest out there and people trying to get creative on how they offer side country and backcountry experiences within their resort boundaries, because there is such growing demand for it.
Okay, great. Let's see. One more resort question for you, Mark, and then we'll switch to the others. But do you think, how do you think that this will impact our ski season next winter? You talked a little bit about, the changing of rental shops and lodges and reducing the number of people, but what other changes do you think resorts might be making to prepare for next winter? And if we're still dealing with this situation, promoting social distancing at ski resorts for next year?
Right now we're kind of game planning for worst case scenario that this could, reemerge at similar levels coming into the season. We're hoping that as we get more data and we can understand how many people are truly infected and how many people may potentially have immunity, that can guide our decision-making process on how we operate. Worst case scenario, I think you're going to see resorts with limiting capacity. I think you're going to see resorts coming up with really creative solutions to to those traditional overcrowded venues that we've all experienced at resorts. What we're looking at is dispersed on mountain food service operations, eat outside, encouraging people to base out of their car, really increasing the availability of online preset rentals with limited human interaction, things that we can do that not only I think will improve this situation, but will improve guest experience over time and make it more efficient for people to get out and get recreating instead of standing in lines and stuffed into buildings. So, but that's, I think, worst case scenario. That's what we're looking at. I hope we're not in a situation where we're forcing more resort closures next year as a result of this. I think that would be just absolutely catastrophic for the industry. I think that's why we all need to take this time we have now to plan and plan effectively and have answers to the questions of how are we going to mitigate the risk and allow people to recreate safely, but also protect the communities where our resorts are located.
Yeah. Sarah, it sounds like you can sort of recreate from your house, which is great, but obviously not everybody is that fortunate. Jason asked, and obviously the state orders are all a little bit different, but most of them say, do not leave your homes unless it's for essential business. What do you think about driving to, say, a trailhead or, to get outside and recreate? Do you think that driving a short distance or a medium distance for outdoor recreation should be considered essential?
It's an interesting question. I think it somewhat depends on the state orders in terms of actually following what the governor is saying or what your local leaders are saying. I feel really fortunate in that I can walk out my front door, but I do think people living in mountain communities where you have to drive a little ways, if trailheads are open and you're able to socially distance, I guess for me that makes sense. Part of why we live in these communities is to be able to get outside, and I do think it makes us better community members. I think, again, it's just a question of weighing the risk. What's the likelihood of something happening? What's the consequence, not only to myself and my party, but also to the greater community? So I think all of this keeps falling back on, that risk analysis that we think about a lot.
Right. Which as outdoor recreationalists, we're all pretty good at risk assessment by now, I hope. And so it's sort of an interesting thing to add to the thought process of how do you make that decision for yourself and what you're comfortable with. Jay, a question that came in before the show was about sort of if you're out, on a hike or a bike ride or even backcountry skiing, what sort of a responsible way to get around people that you may see on the trail? What are your thoughts as a medical professional in terms of how we can pass people and get around folks and still provide that social distancing?
That's a tough one. I haven't come up with I've been thinking about this a great deal, especially after that study came out. And I know a lot of, there's been articles and people responding to that, whether we're at that greater of a risk with exercising and droplet spread of the virus and staying in the streamline behind somebody is putting you at greater risk. So I think personally, I've had to say, let's just step off the trail for a little bit until the crowds go past. Instead of making a new trail, because that's, we all don't want to cause more trails and erosion. So respecting the norms, but modifying your hike, or, if you get there, it's too crowded, well, find another place. Just be prepared to turn around. I don't have a great solution right now, and I'll keep everybody posted and stick it on my social media.
Great, thanks, Jay. For the participants out there, we've got a few more minutes left, so if you have any other questions, jot those down on the Q&A tab. Jay, sorry, let me just check here. Chris asked, is there a centralized online resource or information source for consumers to use for current and relevant info on what to do, what not to do? Maybe Sarah, do you have any suggestions for that in terms of outdoor of resources online for folks that might be looking for guidance?
I'm not totally clear on exactly what this question is asking. I mean, I think, again, going back to those local and regional orders. So depending on what your governor is saying, depending on what your local community is saying in terms of where to go. I think avalanche centers are trying to offer guidance if they are still operating in terms of directing people on what to do or what not to do. In terms of education resources, I know, obviously, shameless self-plug, we're doing Instagram Live and Facebook Live seminars. The Utah Avalanche Center has an online avalanche awareness course. If you're bored and want some more information, we have an online avalanche awareness course. And I think also just, I've been digging into the CDC recommendations and trying to adapt those in terms of what to do and how to be a responsible community member.
Great, thanks.
And Megan, Hendy here real quick. The SIA website does have a COVID hub that we're updating on a regular basis. So we're posting regulations, we're posting resources like the one that you've written, as well as ways for small businesses to, achieve financial support. So I definitely encourage people to go to that SIA hub as much as possible and get daily updates from that.
Great.
And one other resource is in terms of ski area access and what they're doing in terms of allowing uphill travel. Ski Utah has been doing a great job updating their website with input from the resorts on what's allowed and what's not allowed at each resort in the state.
Great. A question from the audience. This is a tough one to answer, so any of you that feel like it. Obviously, our personal freedom to get outside in public lands is something that, as Americans and as people who love the outdoors, is very important to us. How do you guys sort of weigh that our personal freedoms to be able to go outside versus the potential risk that we may be placing both on ourselves and the community at large? How do you maybe personally deal with that dichotomy? Any of you feel like answering that one?
I can shed a little bit of light on this because that weighed heavily in our decision to close the mountain to lift access in the first place. We saw a lot of the influx in skier visitation those days that we were open after some of the surrounding areas started to close. Coming in from the Park City area where there were known cases, and then coming in from Colorado where the resorts had actually closed a couple days earlier, with people just looking to continue their ski vacations. And we did not want our community to be exposed to potentially infected guests coming in that were asymptomatic. And so that led to us making that decision, or was it one of the bigger factors in making that decision, was kind of protecting community health and not straining our resources here locally.
Sarah or Jay, do you want to weigh in on that too, or that was a great answer, Mark? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the answer. The reason I, on a personal level, have chosen not to ski in the backcountry is not that I don't feel like I could manage a day in the backcountry responsibly, but I do think, Mark brought up people following tracks. And I think just, I think just being able to think as a larger community member and recognizing that even if you do have a lot of experience, there are people out there with less experience potentially following you. So.
And Hendy here, and I think both of the guys bring up great points. And one of the points that also came up earlier is that people are getting creative, and we're seeing a lot of innovation with technology. And I'm pretty certain that there's going to be some sort of technology app that gives you a rating at some point around how you are in society. And it's a social skinning app, let's say, or something like, whoa, great idea. No, but maybe there's a way that you can actually come up with a ranking that allows you to see you become in contact with somebody when you're in the field. And then also remembering at 8 o'clock to always just give a good howl for your search and rescue and your hospital workers that are out there, because they're the ones on the front lines and we need to support them. And we want to keep our public lands open. We're all public landowners, but we need to respect their guidelines as well.
All right, one more question from the participants. Oops, sorry, two. We'll try to squeeze them in. One of them asks, as local state orders begin to lift, obviously nothing's going to happen instantly, and we're not going to just return to normal. We all know that now. But Sarah, Jay, or Mark, how do you guys see folks kind of easing back into normal in terms of outdoor recreation as we move into the summer months? Will we start to see, trailheads being used more? Once those state orders are lifted, how do you guys see us sort of easing back into what we all knew as normal? Sarah, do you want?
I don't have a current great answer for this, but this is actually, I'm involved in a couple working groups actually trying to talk about this as an industry, as a guiding industry, as a ski industry, what sort of thresholds do we need to meet, and how do you manage people returning back to more contact? So I think it's an ongoing question that right now I don't have an answer to, but I'm really trying to explore it right now.
One last follow-up on that, actually, from a participant. Sarah, maybe you could answer this one as well, but a lot of outdoor agencies, whether they were ski resorts or guiding outfitters, were able to rely on directives from governments, state governments, to dictate their shutdowns. I know a lot of outdoor retail shops obviously closed down as soon as the state orders were put in place, but once those state orders are lifted, how do you think industry professionals will justify operating versus not operating, and explaining that to their clients or guests?
Yeah, and this is the question that people are starting to ask. Some folks are looking at guidance from OSHA, or as well as the CDC, in terms of people have been talking about obviously not having clients being symptomatic, potentially taking temperatures. The question of how do you social distance? I know it's rock guiding season coming up and river guiding season coming up, and so how do you manage that? Again, I think people are just starting to ask these questions of, are there ways that we can maintain social distancing? And then is this operation something that is going to put more undue stress on our search and rescue and our, front lines of medical community? And I think people don't have an answer right now, but this continues to be at the front of the conversation of, and I think we have to look to our medical community for some of those answers.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we're looking at it pretty pragmatically and trying to make data-driven decisions and looking at what new case rates look like in our community, how many people are traveling to our community to recreate, what the strain on our local resources looks like currently, and what the projections look like. And I think a lot of it's going to depend on the behaviors of the guest or the resource users themselves, and not only responsible recreating and social distancing, but if we are successful with implementing contact tracing and things like that, and how likely people are to open themselves up to being tracked in that manner, there's going to be trade-offs, I think, going forward over the next 12 to 18 months, that if people want to open up society, and particularly recreation opportunities where people do tend to congregate, are we willing to give up some of that freedom for allowing ourselves to be tracked in terms of contact tracing, so we can identify potential hotspots before they pop up and control this? And I'm sure Jay's following that, and hopefully we have good answers, but we're just really relying on data and what's coming out from technology and just kind of behavioral aspects of how people are going to respond to this.
Good. I think this is Jay. I think too, just keeping up to date on the latest information and what we're learning, like Mark's saying, basing your decisions on that. I hope not everybody's waiting for the door to be opened and gonna rush out all at once. I think everybody should test the water slowly and see how it feels over the next, say, 12 to 18 months, how it's going to be, and what's considered safe. Just don't make assumptions. Learn where you're going, what rules and regulations are in place, and hopefully we'll be there sooner than later. But this will affect us for quite a while, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the participants for listening. Thanks to SIA and Hendy, and especially to our three panelists today for taking the time. It was a really good, interesting discussion. I hope we can all move forward appropriately. Stay safe and be healthy out there.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of SA, and I just want to say thank you to all of our guests for sharing their expertise, and thank you all for joining the call. We hope you all found it beneficial. Just remember that the recording is available later today on our hub, which is at snowsports.org/COVID hub. So visit there if you want to re-listen or share it with some other friends. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at info@snowsports.org, and we'll be back in touch immediately. Just remember that SA is here for you during this tough time, so please lean on us. We'll get through this together, and we'll be stronger because of it. So thank you all again for joining us, and we'll talk soon. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over now.